Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of 6 Degrees of Associations. This is an episode I have been looking forward to for quite some time. With us today, KiKi L'Italien, VP of Marketing and Community at Big Red M, an organization I'm somewhat familiar with, and founder and editor-in-chief of Association Chat. Welcome, KiKi.
Hey, I'm glad to be here.
Awesome. Well, as I often do, I want to pass you the microphone and have you do a little bit more introduction about yourself and tell us a little bit, maybe going back a ways, how you found this world of associations.
Oh my gosh. So if I go back and I think about where all of this began, it really was this desire to find my way outside of Missouri, which is where I'm from. And I was visiting my brother, Jeff. He's a reporter in Baltimore. We were out to dinner with some family friends. And it turned out that somebody was looking for a marketer to go into their association and do some marketing work. And I said, I'll do it. And it moved to Bethesda, Maryland. And I was visiting my brother. I didn't even go back to move out of my apartment in Missouri, Joplin, Missouri. I actually had my mom and stepfather move all my stuff out. I immediately started as soon as I could. And that's how I got into the association industry.
Well, then fast forward a few years, you're still here. What's kept you around?
I'll tell you. So I fell in love with the association industry, and anybody who's like really embedded in the association industry, it's like sometimes it's a love, hate kind of thing, because you feel, or at least I'll speak for myself, I feel like there's so much that associations are. There's so much possibility. There's so much that we can do together. There's an association for everything, as we say. And then it's like it represents every industry, every science, every profession that you can think of. And so, this is a great amount of responsibility and a great amount of opportunity. And a lot of times it's called government light, which is not a compliment, because there are all these... Yeah, there's like this bureaucracy and regulation and this great responsibility, but oftentimes it's just as bureaucratic to get any decision made. So I got into the association industry and I really fell in love with it because of all of that possibility. This idea of bringing people together around a mission really appeals to me. And I'm just kind of fascinated by that. What's possible when we all come together and really try to do something. So
we can do a lot of good things with a lot of small businesses, we would say, because most of them are. And I want to come back to associations. And we talked about pre-show how they could be kind of like a small town. There's a little bit of a metaphor there. But before we do that, let's dive into Association Chat. So first, you have a very successful pod yourself. So we've now turned the microphone. How does that feel?
I know. Yeah. Well, thank you. I mean, Association Chat, it's beautiful. It's a beautiful thing. I'm very proud of it. And it started out, I always say this joke, so just roll your eyes, Lucas, because you've heard it a million times, but it's like the most pornographic sounding hashtag in the association space. Ass and Chat, right? Hashtag Ass and Chat. Started out as a tweet chat, and Jeff DeCania was like, bringing people together, early conversations on Twitter. And then I started organizing the conversations and saying, this week we're going to talk about this topic, and this week we're going to talk about this one. And here's your question 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and moderating those conversations. And as you might imagine, it's very, very difficult to have more complicated conversations around things like value proposition when you're on Twitter. So eventually it had to evolve, and I studied journalism when I was in college, and so started interviewing people, and it was a natural thing to just sort of go into doing a podcast.
Well, obviously I've watched lots of the show, so I feel like I'm the rookie here interviewing
No.
pro, but it's still fun because we can have lots of great conversations around it. But so what about today? What is for the minority of folks out there in our audience who don't know association chat? How would you describe it today?
Association chat. Well, it was described to me just yesterday talking to somebody who's going to be a sponsor as a media company. And I don't know that I feel comfortable really calling it that exactly, but I guess it kind of is. It's a website. It's a podcast. We have live events. We have education that's offered. It's just a number of different things. And of course, there's the online community, which is something that is always evolving and always growing. And we have a book club. We have so much. So I guess it is kind of a media company.
Yeah, I would add it's almost like a community within the larger community. It's a resource. I mean, one of the things that I like on the vendor side of our space is that there's tons of really great folks who've learned to specialize in different areas, because there are so many facets of working and running and managing an association. And, people get tossed in, and most people that I interview, they just sort of fall into it, right? By accident. Like, what is this crazy world? And then you have to sort of navigate. And so I love that there's these little micro resources within the larger association space that sort of service different areas. So what would be that, like, one or two service areas that you think Association Chat specializes in? And then maybe if you wave your magic wand, which I like to do often, as what else could be?
Oh gosh. I think so for a while, Association Chat had a Patreon where people, for several years, where people they were sort of the hardcore supporters. And I would ask them, what is it that you want from Association Chat? Because there's so much that it's always been this thing that is, whether it's writing, more interviews, is it a certain type of interview? And the thing that I heard back from the most passionate supporters of Association Chat was that they actually follow me to see what is it that they need to know that they're not being told in the association space, that they don't know about in the association space, that will help them think differently and move ahead. So they're really looking for innovative ideas. They're looking for something that is a little different than the association industry can be a little bit of a siloed environment where we all look to the same thought leaders. We read the same things, and Association Chat's been sort of known, I think, for pushing the boundaries and trying new things, new platforms. I mean, that's another thing, is like the live streaming thing we've been doing that for over 10 years, way before COVID. It was way before any of that stuff. And consequently, it's been on like probably a dozen platforms at this point, testing out different types of technology. So that's one of the big things that I think people have come to expect. And it's probably why the earliest followers and supporters were sort of to the core, the early adopters and the people who are really interested in technology and how it's being used.
So is that sort of what pushed you towards technology? Because the journalism sort of led you naturally to the marketing. That makes sense. You just have an affinity for people. Now that I've got to know you, like, you're an attractive personality. You like being around people. And then there's the technology component, which could seem out of place because some people think of technology as the people in the back room building these platforms for people that aren't for people. So is that what sort of forced it? The community wanted you to start thinking and talking about technology?
Well, kind of. And then also, I think when I first, not to date myself, but when I started out in that first association job, it was around about that time when some of the earliest social media was being released to the world. And we were able to start thinking about what's possible with using social media for bringing people together. So something that I became known for in the industry, I started speaking and presenting at like the American Society of Association Executives at a kind of early in my career about innovative ways to use social media to bring chapters together. That was something that I started doing even before Facebook opened up to the rest of the world. And so I was using things like High Five and MySpace and like I did all these different tests to basically bring volunteer groups together. So I was really, really interested in how technology could be used to do that. And was actually, and not everybody knows this, but some people who've known me for a long time, was known for community building, online community building in my earliest days for associations.
Ah.
Yeah.
Well, let's go back to associations in general. We did get a chance, sort of pre-show to chat a little bit. And I think maybe it was Casey, our producer, that helped us lead to this idea of like, yeah, associations maybe are a little bit like small towns. Like,
yeah.
So what do you think about that notion?
I mean, I think it is. I think that's another reason why I like associations and why I also am fascinated by the way that they work. Because this industry can seem somewhat small, but it is definitely something where people are protective. There's a way to go about doing things. We're very, very invested in understanding if someone is coming in a sort of transactional, we're not around for the long haul, we're just here for the moment kind of thing, or if it's someone who truly understands associations and what they're all about, because it's very easy when to determine if somebody doesn't understand the association industry pretty early on, whether they're a speaker, a vendor, somebody who's wanting to do some kind of business within the association space. It's like, you have to understand us really to get it. And we're always kind of testing, right? We're always kind of looking to see, have you done your homework? Do you actually get it? And I think a great example of this is like, I was listening to a speaker. He was great at the very beginning. He was not the keynote. He was like a breakout speaker. And I thought, this guy should have been our keynote. He's amazing. And then it became apparent he didn't understand associations, and it just fell apart. He was so good. And then at that moment, he started talking to everyone about, it's like in your association, what's your association? The person says, the Association of Dental Hygienists. And he says, yeah, so you guys are in people's mouths all the time. And it's like, no, we're not. We're not. We're the association for those people, right?
Right.
But it's that kind of thing. It's like, you have to understand, kind of like what associations are all about and how we're looking to bring people together, and also the business case, the business models for associations, how we actually put the money to the mission.
Yeah. I made that observation, I won't date myself, some years ago as well, earlier in my association career, visiting ASAE, and a good mutual friend of ours, Deidre Daniel, used to run every year. I think it was probably the most attended session of the ASAE annual meeting, which was how to sell to associations. I mean, the room was packed, and I was just kind of taken back by, why is this such an attractive session for people to go to? And I realized it was just that. It was almost a room full of people. Maybe 80% of the people were that. They were, they want to do some type of transaction. It was a vendor that just wanted to like access these members because they Googled, went on the web and found out this could be a great audience. And what a better way to get to that audience than through the association. So I can sell them, I can get to all those members. And it felt very transactional. And as I've gotten to know you better, like, this idea of trust keeps coming up. And I think that's a lens that you look through every day. And so tell us a little bit about, I think that is the barrier, right? And that does not something that you can just build overnight, but tell us a little bit about your experience there.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if you want to play like armchair a psychiatrist or anything or psychologist, but so I'm from a small town, and that small town is in Missouri, which is the show me state. So it's like, oh, you can't tell me, you got to show me, And so, so my husband hates when I bring this up. He's a good New Jersey boy. He definitely is like, whatever, stop. But the point is that being from a small town in a place like that, you're always looking around and trying to evaluate, that, can I trust that new person that's come in and they don't really know our ways? They don't really know who we are. And I also think that now, if we add the whole technology component of everything, as people have gotten more isolated socially, even though we have the technology that can bring us closer and closer together, there's this question of like, how do I evaluate how I trust somebody else? Where does that come from? And how can I build that on purpose? And the thing is that you can. Con artists do it very quickly, right? They figure out how we can give them our trust. But if you're not out for nefarious purposes and you're trying to figure out how do I figure out how to cultivate trust on purpose, then it becomes really, really important to understand what it is that people look for so that we can build that trust. And if you're wanting to cultivate a relationship, whether it's a personal relationship or professional relationship with your team, whatever it happens to be, it's like, well, how do we do that? And so obviously for associations, that's really, really critical. Because, you're trying to get that buy-in and that trust and that legitimacy and hold on to that, because it's something that's only becoming more valuable and more rare as the years go by. And we have things like deep fakes now, and we have things like, AI. And am I talking to a person I don't even know anymore? And so, the trust piece of all of this is super, super important. I'm fascinated by the topic. I just constantly am always like pulling in more and more research about it. And I try to actively cultivate, and incorporate that stuff into my own relationships all the time.
Yeah. Well, you're clearly very good at it. Whatever it is that you're doing, it works, right? You've built a personal community, you've built the association chat community. I've seen you sort of go through networking events where it takes you 10 times as long to get across the room because everybody's like, oh, KiKi, I want to talk to you. And you have just, again, that attractive personality. You do relationships right. So let me put you on the spot and sanitize this answer as much as you feel like you need to. Names,
oh my
events,
gosh, this sounds so dangerous.
I know,
sanitizing answers.
So give us an example of when you did this right, and then maybe give us an example in the association community where you tripped up. Maybe it didn't work out and you would have done it differently.
Ooh, that's a really good one. Okay.
And sometimes I'll just speak for a second to give you more time to think. Sometimes it's just the smallest thing. I had, for example, somebody in the association community who I was at another office, this is years ago, and he came and knocked on the door and nobody ever heard it. And he finally called me on the phone because we're on the other side of the office. And he said, I'm at the front door. I'm going to make this story short. And, we had the meeting. It was great. And then the next day he came by with a doorbell for my office. It was just like the smallest thing. He's like, I wouldn't want you to miss out on a great opportunity with somebody who was coming to see you. And he gave me that. And I was like, I never forgot that. That was over 10 years ago. And I just thought it was just like a little small thing on the relationship and trust side, but it stuck with me.
Yeah. I think that one of the things that I have done really right, that's kind of hard because it's easier to remember the things. I know,
you got to brag on yourself for a second
tough.
Too. It's like,
I think that so one of the things that I've done that's really right is in showing, I've been more committed to association chat as a community and showing up with content, even if I wasn't sure exactly if it was going to show up the right way or the perfect way. I've been really committed to that more than any fitness regimen, any pen pal, anything. I've been really committed, and I've shown that commitment over time. And I think that that's built a lot of foundational trust with that community, because they know, they've seen me before I was a mom, as a mom, through different moves in my career, through different hairstyles. Everything you can imagine. Right. And so, I've spent like over 20 years in this, and association chat is, it's like a year younger than Margot. So it's 15 years old, right? It's 15 years. So it's a long time. And then
Margot, your daughter, for those that don't know, again.
Yeah, Margot, my daughter.
Yeah.
And then I guess where I've gotten it wrong, which, I wish I didn't have any examples, but I guess
myself. Yeah.
I'll pick on something that is a bad habit. And it's something that I really I just always need to get better at. But I think it's something that people can identify with. And that is one of the things that I teach about when I'm talking about trust is you establish patterns of behavior, and people pay attention, whether they grant you grace or not. They pay attention to the things that you say that you're going to do, and they compare that against what you actually do, right? And so one of the ongoing ways that I'm constantly letting myself and others down, which is horrible, I'm really bad with responding to the email I get. I'm really bad about it. I understand inbox zero. I can't ever pretend like I would ever get even close to that. But more importantly, being more responsive to emails. I get an incredible amount of email. I probably have 6 different inboxes that I'm in and out of. One of them I pay a lot more attention to than all the rest, but it's a lot.
I thought I was bad with 4. Goodness.
I know. Well, you should be happy. Big Red M's it's like the number one inbox I pay attention to. But I kind of one client has you on Slack, and then you're on Teams, and then you're on all this stuff. And I'm also navigating, the association chat channels and all of the social media. So inevitably, I'm not going to see all of the messages, or I'm going to read it and then I'm going to think I need to get back, and I don't get back right then. And it's just, I have an overwhelming amount of things that come in, and I haven't figured out the answer for that, but that's where I definitely fall down, and I feel guilty about it like every day of my life.
That reminded me, I saw an advertisement recently. I don't even remember where it was. And it was talking about somebody sent their kid an email. It was like, kid looks like a teenager, maybe early 20s. And their response is like, nobody my age reads emails. Like,
yeah.
Will there be a day we don't have emails? Because that would be great.
I don't know. There's a use for them for sure, but I definitely, so many conversations and text messages, and I don't know. I feel like there are so many different channels with which to communicate that it's just becoming very difficult. I have a lot, but I know people who are busier and have more that they're juggling than I do. And I don't know how they do it. I really don't.
Goodness, making me exhausted just thinking about 6 inboxes. I thought it was stretched with 4, and I have one that I really don't touch. But
I was going to say, I think that you're one of those people that has a lot that you're juggling. So,
Yeah, I think for me, it's come down to priorities, right? I mean, almost daily, I have to reset the list and think about, okay, well, if this doesn't get done, this is way more impactful if it doesn't happen than if this one, right? And so it's this constant shuffle, and it's a little bit like an association executive, I would imagine, in that seat of there's obviously advocacy and marketing and their events, in that seat, it's just a constant juggle is kind of in reprioritization.
Yeah. And 20% of your time, any association executive, 20% of their time probably will be communicating and juggling the relationship that they have with the board. That's 20% right off the top.
A lot.
Right. Yeah. I mean, but you have to, because this is the strategic direction of the organization, and those relationships are so important. So, yeah, I know we're all juggling, but that's definitely one of those areas where I'm I need to figure out some answers, and I can't claim that I have them. So
When you do
Not
come
yet.
back, and
I'm not giving up.
we'll share it with our little world here, because I'm sure everybody would be curious to figure that out. That's not unique to KiKi, I don't think, is the answer. Oh, well, earlier you mentioned you do travel around, you do some speaking, you used to do some speaking, you still do some speaking. What are some of your favorite topics these days when you're out on the road at different events, being the keynote and talking to different groups and in the community?
Yeah, well, I'm getting ready to keynote, be the closing keynote for the Georgia Society of Association Executives, which I've been so excited to go and check out. Now, talk about community. That's one where their organization is just known for having a lot of real loyal supporters and stuff like that. So I'm curious, and I told Wendy Kavanaugh when I get down there, I'm like, I know I'm here to do the keynote, but I'm like really, really curious to see, like, what's this all about? What's the magic that is making all of this work so well? I'm starting to hear from different people. I'm like having conversations, starting to find out. So clearly, one of my favorite things to talk about is trust. Always, I'm always teaching about that. How do you cultivate trust on purpose with volunteers? How do you do it with your members? How do you do it in marketing? Because all these things play into each other. And then the other part is, when it has to do with community building, I like to talk about community building. I guess if there's a third that I've kind of been becoming more known for lately, it's about talking about associations and AI, which there's a natural connection there because of the ties of understanding how associations work and how they do or don't bring in innovative new types of technology and some of the complications that can come as a result of that. And then, of course, everybody's interested in, well, what do I need to know about large language models, and what are the challenges and opportunities of, building in some machine learning and this whole generative AI stuff. And so that's been a popular topic. So anyway, I was saying for Georgia Society of Association Executives, I'm talking about trust, one, and then I'm also leading an AI workshop while I'm there.
So we don't want to spill the AI workshop, but do you have one sort of at the ready that is like your absolute must do, implement AI? This is the perfect use case for it within associations. And do you have one that's like, don't touch this with a 10-foot pole?
Oh yeah. I mean, I have to do the obvious caveat at the very beginning by saying, first always look at making sure that you have a good policy in place so that people know what they're empowered to do or not do. So like from an organizational standpoint, you need to be thinking about like, what are you allowing your employees to do, and and your volunteers too, and how do they know what they're allowed to use or not use, and then, looking at how you're building in training and upskilling and things like that for your employees after that. The other thing I would say is there's a lot of conversation about you have the policy and the like upskilling side over here. And then there's this discussion about productivity over here, which is like the lowest hanging fruit is how can I make sure that this staff member isn't spending too much time on something that we could have a tool to do instead. But where I think that there's a danger is in stopping there and then not thinking like, okay, we've been hearing for years about how our data is gold. And now you have these tools that allow you to learn and then regularly process what we can do with that data in order to make it more valuable for our members or maybe our partners in the industry. And so as an organization, I think, when you're thinking from a leadership standpoint, then it's like, okay, what are we now able to do? And how do we decide what thing to focus on next? Because you might have like a handful of things that could all be really lucrative or beneficial, but how do you choose, right? You can't do it all. So that's interesting stuff going on.
That's true. I think a little bit goes back to the priority statement from earlier is like, well, you and I both have lots of things that, we have in our hands like ready to do, but we can't do it all, unfortunately.
Yeah,
So you have
for
to sort of pick
sure.
and choose what's going to be. I thought asterisks on the policy part, I think is very applicable. I thought you were going to say asterisks on the fact that it's associations and the old adage, like if you've met one, you've met one. So both apply, I think, to as it relates to AI. It's like the answer that nobody wants to give, like, it depends.
Right. The consultant's answer, right? It's like, it depends. Kind of cover your assets.
You can say it on the show. It's fine. Yeah. It's fine. In good company.
Yeah.
What? So here's a question I like to ask the guests. Like, what's something every year, start of the year, that you look forward to? That's it's on your calendar, Jan 1. You're ready for it.
So a lot of people will say that they are not goal setters, and they don't believe in resolutions. And I really I know that I know some of the people, because every year I'm the other person. I'm the person that likes that. I love that stuff. I live for it. Right. So like, I'm always thinking like, okay, is this going to be the year that I finally teach myself how to juggle, And,
well, now I'm dying to know.
I have, I seriously, so I've all, you know how humans are supposed to have all these different intelligences. And one of them is like this ability to sort of move your body through space, like the kinetic intelligence. So athletes have this. They're like, that's like their best intelligence. Some people have they're really great at all of them. And I will tell you that my least successful intelligence is this ability to sort of navigate your body through space. And what's really interesting to know is that when you juggle, you actually are using all different types of parts of your brain. So if you're like fighting, Alzheimer's or like dementia, if you're trying to like become better at languages, there are certain aspects of juggling that, because you're doing this, your mind is operating in a way that it's not just kinetic, but it's actually like helping you to develop all these different areas. I'm really bad at it. I'm really, some people could do this in like an hour and pick it up and make it happen. I had a boyfriend in college and he was great at juggling. I am so bad at it.
Can we please do a follow-up interview and check in the fall and just go to see how you're doing? It could be like 5 minutes and just show us what you got.
Yes, absolutely. Okay. Because
I'll be your accountability partner there for your juggling New Year's.
Yeah, I even have a book over here, because of course you're going to read and learn how to juggle, right? And that's where I go wrong, right? I read a lot, but
I have heard something like that. But it was, if you're predominantly right-handed, which I am, I guess most people are, like, start to force yourself to do things. Like if you always drink from your right hand, like drink with your left hand. If you brush your teeth with your right hand, brush your teeth with your left hand. So I try to implement that, not all the time, but I'm like, all right, well, the only thing I can't do is write with my left hand. But anything else, if you can try it, do it.
That's a good idea. I might try to do that, and just same idea is like, just keep your mind kind of learning new things and stretching and
keep it stretching, keep it learning.
Yeah. So at the beginning of every year, I'm like, is this going to be the year? Right. And there's other goals. I'm usually I'm more successful at those than I am at obviously juggling, but I'm not giving up.
This comes up often in strategic planning. I feel like strategic planning, when it really boils down to it for associations, is really, goal setting and prioritizing. And it's such a big deal. And, I've talked in the past in other episodes about how it used to be associations would do strategic planning every 5, sometimes, dare I say it, 10 years. There were 7 to 10 year strategic plans, which I think now I just sort of laugh and chuckle at. Like, who can predict what's going to happen in 7 years to a point where you would build a plan? I think you can build a big, audacious goal to go after, but the idea of building a predictable enough plan within a reasonable sense of margin, that makes me chuckle. So I like your idea of like, what are we going to do this year?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I like it too. And I think, with association chat, that's like one of those things where I'll throw this back on you and say, you test me on that. You'll say like, where do you think it's going? Where do you think it? And I'll be like, it's going to be a network. It's going to be a network of podcasts. Like it's going to be all this stuff. But the thing that I think we're getting closer to, and the thing that I have sort of dreamt about for a long time, is this idea of being able to do a road show with going to different places. Part of it being like having a bus, going to different towns, like going to Chicago, and not just having it being focused on the DC, like inside the Beltway. But really taking it and bringing the community, because as association chat, I'm like, I'm interested in connecting with association people everywhere. And so like, how do we bring education on the road? How do we bring that like networking on the road? How do we do that? And can I share like about the first way that we've got?
Go for it.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and share it.
I'm just association chat announcement. Like
I'm making the decision right now. I'm going to go ahead and say it, which is this is the first year where the first part of that idea is really going to happen. And this bus to ASAE annual, going to Cleveland, reporting on the road, going around and talking to people along the way, going live. I mean, this is the first step in that idea. And I think that, there's a lot of excitement around it just because it's like, oh, we're moving and we're reporting and it's live and it's so exciting. But where it could go from that is like, if you think about the way food trucks roll up and it's like, here's your dumplings or whatever it is that you're like ordering from the food trucks.
Here's your community.
Here's your community. Can you imagine like going in and you're on, like, say you're in DC and it's like you set something up and it's like you're like giving
a traveling
away
pop-up of community and topics and conversation.
Yeah.
And it's so Kiki. And I was like, I couldn't see it happening any other way. And I'm happy that, Big Red M could be the first sponsor of such an endeavor. Of
I'm
like
excited
the association
too.
Chat on the road show. I'm like, so wait, there's going to be live people and there's going to be community and you're going to be giving interviews and live updates. I'm like, yeah, I'm in. Like, I'm
super, super, super excited about it. Very excited. I don't know if the wrap around it is going to happen, if it's going to be like the association chat mobile quite yet. But the point is that we're heading in that direction, and I'm excited. I think it's going to be great.
That's awesome. Well, more to come. It sounds like we'll just tell folks that now. Is that's the takeaway? Is you're saying more to come on that, folks? And
by the time. By the time you see us in Cleveland, by the time we connect in Cleveland for ASAE annual, there's gonna be some exciting things that you already are hearing about. So
that is fun.
More in the works.
What about something? You're all over the place, right? You're one of those people. You're not hard to find. You're an open book. You build a lot of trust. But maybe what's something about Kiki that we couldn't find on a resume or online or on association chat?
Well, so I mean, there are a few things, one is that I really love poetry, and I used to do performance poetry, and otherwise known as slam poetry. And that when I was in college, I was on 60 Minutes for, a blink and you miss it sort of moment. But I was competing nationally in Chicago in the National Poetry Slam. And
tell me there's a recording somewhere, please.
There is a little bit. So 60 Minutes, they actually were, I didn't even know, we signed releases when we were performing on stage. All the performers did, all the poets. And so I'm back at school and had forgotten about it. And then my mom started getting calls actually about, is KiKi on 60 Minutes? And so she's like, I don't know. And they're talking about an upcoming episode. And they were using my part to advertise the show, right? So the part where I'm on stage is what they were using. I mean, the poet at that part, I'm like saying, poetry can only get you so far, and I'm saying this into a microphone on stage, and people are like, that's KiKi. So they're calling my mom. Now, date yourself, right? So she's like, do you have a VHS tape so that you can like record it? And this, things were different then, but I actually got it recorded. And, she called me and I was able to like turn on 60 Minutes and there I was. So, and you can find it, but here's the trick is that it was under my maiden name because I wasn't married yet. And and this is pre social media and stuff. So you have to really dig. So, but I do.
Or we could include the link when we post this episode, and so that it'll be just nice and easy.
I'm not helping you.
I think what we're really setting up for is in the fall. It is a juggling and slam poetry at once KiKi talent show. Like this is
maybe on the poetry, but I'm telling you. I guess I'll tell another thing too, because I used to write. When I was in college, I also worked the front desk for our local newspaper. And so I would take the obituaries over the phone and then I would type them while I was talking to the morticians and stuff. And so that's all form writing. So basically you just get the same types of information and you write it kind of the same all the time. So one of my favorite party tricks used to be that I could go to a party and I'd be like, okay, give me your name. Give me when were you born? And like, where were you born? And then I'll make up the rest, right? And I would make up some fantastic way that they died and things that they had done before they died and where the contributions could go, like in lieu of flowers, But I would be like, so-and-so, yada, this born such and such a date. And would compose extemporaneous obituaries on the spot for my friends and people around and parties. So yeah,
please tell me you'll be doing that for people who ride the association chat bus to Cleveland.
Maybe
that would be 5-star entertainment in my book.
I don't know if people want to think about that while they're actively in the bus. Maybe after we safely arrive at the destination,
Oh, like this is like a final destination bus. That's not the kind of road show I think you're planning for this to be, but interesting.
Right.
Hilarious. Well, KiKi, thank you for your transparency. Thank you for your community building, your wisdom, your commitment to associations, and your time here. I have the unfortunate duty of wrapping us up on these shows, but I do get to ask you, do you have somebody in your network that you think our audience would benefit from hearing from?
Yeah, I was actually thinking about this because I know this is what you do, right? And you always ask for that, like, who's a really great person? And so Samantha Evans is a phenomenal person to talk to. Reason why is because she is not only is she a lovely human being, but she's also very wise, educated, and knowledgeable about all things accessibility and technology, which I think is super important. One big thing that people usually don't think about is that at any given point with any group of people, there's about 20% who have some kind of accessibility issue, whether it's due to neurodivergence or physical issues. And because of that, you could be leaving out 20% of any group of people when you're not considering accessibility. And so, especially with technology. So she would be an excellent person for you to have.
I agree. I mean, I think about our industry, our community. If you're a CEO of a large association and you have 100,000 members, I think 20,000 of them would be having something that would be standing in their way of communication or an experience as it relates to marketing or an online event, like that's a significant number. So that sounds like a great topic, and we only have fabulous human beings on this show, so she will fit in wonderfully. Thank you for that, and thank you again for your time.